What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the latest episode of WWE The Day Of, focusing on Super ShowDown 2020 from a few short weeks ago. I was originally supposed to talk about the latest episode of Ms. and Mrs. here today, but I actually just found out this morning, and I guess the commercial aired during last week's episode. I just completely missed it or skipped over it, whatever. That the show actually isn't coming back until the summer. So I don't know why Wikipedia had like 10 episodes listed for this, the first half of season 2. I guess the remainder of those episodes won't be airing until like June or July. So I thought that was bizarre. So I was expecting to watch that this morning, review it for the channel here today, but that's actually not coming back until the summer. So I'll have to figure something else out to put up on Fridays going forward for the foreseeable future, at least until Total Bellas comes back in a couple short weeks, at least as originally planned, unless the series is delayed for whatever reason with the whole coronavirus thing, whatever. I'm also actually recording this on my phone for the first time. Usually I obviously use my Yeti microphone and whatnot, but as I record this right now, I'm setting up the latest Windows update, and it's taking a lot longer than I thought it would. So I'm just recording it on my phone, and I took all the notes on my phone too. So please excuse me if I mess up any of the notes here that I took while watching this special. But it was very good. Say what you will about Super ShowDown, how maybe not forgettable. It definitely was not a forgettable show, if only for that main event. I actually enjoyed this Saudi Arabia pay-per-view more than any other installment to date. The Crown Jewel show, Greatest Royal Rumble, last year's Super ShowDown. I know that's not saying much because a lot of these shows are completely forgettable, glorified house shows, what have you. Not to say that this was a must-see show. I did skip through a lot of bullshit while watching it on delay. But it ended up being, in my opinion, one of the more bearable Saudi Arabia pay-per-views they put on to date. It kind of fell off a cliff in those final few matches with the main event and the steel cage match, and even the women's match I thought wasn't all that good. But overall, though, I thought at least the undercard was a lot better than I thought it would be. And this Day Of makes it 10 times more bearable, too. I thought this Day Of was great. So we hear from Miz first, who talks about how it's always electric to be in Saudi Arabia, to kind of be there and feel like the Beatles coming off the plane, feeling like a big deal, doing the press for the pay-per-view beforehand. We hear from Naomi, who talks about how she's anticipating tomorrow, because this was recorded the day before, when she's talking about the event and how she's looking forward to being a part of the first ever women's championship match in Saudi Arabia, which is pretty cool. And for her, it feels like it's a win-win. Regardless of whether she walks out as champion or not, she's still competing in a championship match in Saudi Arabia, which alone is history-making, and she'd never imagined something like this ever happening. Goldberg says that he's lucky enough to still be here, even at age 50-something, doing what he does, honing his craft, going in there, wrestling for world championships. And he says that the new guy shouldn't take him lightly, that they shouldn't underestimate him, despite the fact that he's 50-something. But that, he's not taking them lightly either. Guys like Bray Wyatt, people that, that he's going in there and having matches with Dolph Ziggler, that he's going in there fighting for these championships. He says that he shouldn't be taking them lightly either because, Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, has been undefeated for so long. And obviously he's speaking in character. But, he's not underestimating their ability in the slightest. We hear from Angelo Dawkins, who he and Montez Ford, they competed as the Street Profits for the World Tag Team titles on this show, the Raw Tag Team titles. They ended up winning them on the subsequent episode of Raw. They did not win them here, but I thought it was a good match for what it was. He says that this is what you work for every day, and that they put a lot of work into this to get where they are today. And they're on their first Saudi Arabia pay-per-view. I don't think they were in the last one, because the last Saudi Arabia pay-per-view at Crown Jewel, I don't think they were there for that one. I don't think they were in that WWE World Cup tournament, but they are competing for the Raw Tag Team titles on this show. Bayley's comments I thought were very interesting. So we hear from her, and she talks about how happy she's been with her recent run as the SmackDown Women's Champion. She said that she didn't really know who she was when she was first moved to SmackDown in the Superstar Shakeup about a year ago. And that this title run has felt a lot like her NXT Women's Championship run. Right after Sasha Banks got called up, and Charlotte and Becky, and they were all kind of a group. And now the spotlight's on her. It's all about her. It's all about getting better and establishing an identity for herself. And that's where the similarities kind of come from between the two title runs for her. and she felt like she had to start over upon coming to SmackDown after her reign as the WWE Women's Tag Team Champion with Sasha came to an end. And up until recently, she wasn't with Sasha, up until Sasha went heel and they reunited, and Bayley went heel as well to kind of follow in her footsteps. She was kind of doing her own thing. And she feels, obviously she's speaking in character when she says this, that her goal is to put SmackDown on the map, and she feels that she's been successful in that respect as the SmackDown Women's Champion. Unfortunately, a lot of people's perspective of her title reign and her whole heel character is that it's been a complete flop. And honestly, that's my opinion as well. I'm a big Bayley fan. You will not find bigger Bayley fans than myself. You will not find one of the bigger Bayley fans out there than me, but I think the whole title run has been just a complete, not waste of time, because they tried. I appreciate the effort to turn her heel and do something different, but the matches have not been good. The Naomi match, which they praised, and they're like, oh, they put in a great effort, and they did, but the match wasn't great. The Lacey Evans match of the Rumble wasn't all that good. She hasn't had a lot of memorable matches for the right reasons as the SmackDown Women's Champion. Even during her first run about a year ago when she first won it, that moment of when she won it in Hartford and Money in the Bank, I was there for that. It was an amazing moment. But everything else that has followed since then has not been the greatest. So I thought her comments were very interesting. I mean, again, she's saying this for the camera, so who knows whether that's how she really feels. But I have not been a real big fan of her heel run. Again, I appreciate the effort to try something different because her character really needed some sort of a change. She was getting booed anyway, so might as well turn her heel. But the whole, oh, I'm your role model, blah, blah, blah bullshit really has not panned out, at least in my opinion. Goldberg reflects on being back in Saudi Arabia after his last match there a year ago against The Undertaker, also at Super ShowDown. Was a disaster. The match sucked. He lost. Not that that really matters. But he talks about how, he talks to the producer about how, you would think that he wouldn't want to be back. It was such a bad experience, which is true. And he admits that. It was a nightmare for him as well, as much as it was for everyone else watching it. But he says that he wants to come back to Saudi Arabia to rectify everything that went wrong with the match, make it up to Taker and all the other fans. It's a new day, and it's time to move forward. And he's not talking about the New Day faction either. He said that everything last time was a complete negative, and he has his reservations about this time as well. But he likes to be as prepared as possible. He only got the call to come back 3.5 weeks before this. So that puts the timeline around Royal Rumble weekend, when they decided to bring Goldberg back on that Friday's episode of SmackDown and announce him as the number one contender to the SmackDown Universal Championship. And again, he has his reservations about how good the match is going to go in the moment and whatever else. But he's hoping to make it up for the disaster that went down in Saudi Arabia not a few months ago, but about a year ago in June of 2019. We hear from Roman Reigns, who talks about how he's worked hard to set the situation up the way that he wanted it. I have no idea what he's talking about here, whether he's talking about the feud with Baron Corbin, King Corbin, or just getting back to Saudi Arabia and avenging that loss to Shane McMahon from a year ago in Saudi Arabia. This marked, I think, his first win. Actually, that's a lie. He won that 10-man tag team match in Saudi Arabia the last time. But previously, he had lost to Shane McMahon and who else was in that? Who did he face on that first Saudi show? Oh, Brock Lesnar at the Greatest Royal Rumble, because he wasn't there at Crown Jewel the first time because he was sick. That's when he had leukemia and he took time off. But anyway, he worked hard to get back to this point, and he feels like tonight he's going to prove why he's the big dog of the WWE. So a lot of the corporate nonsense here, but it's nice that he feels that way. But the match was completely terrible. And now I don't really know if that match proved anything other than the fact that their chemistry is complete shit. Anyway, Naomi, we see her practicing her entrance before a big SmackDown Women's Championship match. She didn't know what to expect when she came back after such a long layoff of whether the fans would accept her or not. But and also, not only that, but this is her first one-on-one match with Bayley. So she's facing a totally different Bayley here. Bayley was a completely different person when she was last in WWE, in the summer of 2019. But they're ready to make history, and she's emotional and excited at the same time going into that match. Ricochet jokes about wanting Christian's, Christian Sparks, like when the Christian's old entrance from like back in the day. Randy Orton had it too. And I feel like someone has those sparks now. It might be The Miz. But Christian Sparks, the whole Randy Orton legend killer Sparks from back in the day, he wants those same Sparks in Saudi Arabia. He says, how expensive could they really be? But all joking aside, he remembers his first match on his 15th birthday, his first real pro wrestling match in his backyard or someone's backyard or something like that. And he said you got to remember those times to appreciate times like this where he's competing for the WWE Championship against Brock Lesnar of all people. John Morrison has been back now for about 2 months since returning to WWE. He saw a big sandstorm when they first landed, and which is a little weird for him to mention. But he talks about, oh, it's cool. I've never seen a sandstorm before, so I thought that was slightly fascinating. But he talks about how this match with the New Day, it feels like he and Miz are picking up where they left off, and that he's really stoked for tonight, and he's looking forward to walking out as the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. And he also jokes about wearing a fur coat in Saudi Arabia, because, I mean, it was so hot there the last time they were there in June of last year, and you would think to yourself, why are they back there? I mean, actually, the last time was back in November, but he recognizes that Saudi Arabia has their winter too, and it's actually not as hot there as people, imagine it being. It's not as hot as people expect it to be. So anyway, he talks about how he said he would be lying after the match, after they show the match itself and they recap them winning the SmackDown Tag Team titles. He said he would be lying if the journey about how we talked about in his Chronicle about a month ago, whether the journey would be more exciting than the destination. He kind of goes into heel mode here and saying that the destination is more exciting than the journey, now becoming the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions, and that he's focused on WrestleMania and creating an all-new legacy alongside The Miz. And speaking of The Miz, he talked about all the other tag teams, the Usos, the New Day, whether they doubted their ability to come back and win Tag Team Gold, and now they've done it. And he says they're ready to defend against all comers as the champions. We hear from Andrade real quickly, who's back from a suspension. Well, obviously, he doesn't mention that stuff, but he does discuss real quick the what is the Takai, not Takai, the 2-week trophy, that tournament, and he looks at all of his upcoming challengers, and he says he's looking forward to it. The Gauntlet match is recapped, that disaster of a match, and The Undertaker returning. We hear from some fans in attendance who talk about how they want WrestleMania and Riyadh at some point in Saudi Arabia down the road. I don't ever see that happening, but it's a nice goal to have, I suppose. We hear from Ricochet, who says that anything is possible, regardless of your size, and he's excited for the opportunity to face Brock Lesnar in Saudi Arabia for the WWE title. And they recap that match as well, which went all of 90 seconds. Not the recap, but rather the match itself went all of 90 seconds. We see the SmackDown Women's Championship match as well. That was recapped. We hear from Naomi afterward, who says that she feels like she's home, not in Saudi Arabia, but back in WWE. And she says that it was a dream come true to contend for the championship in Saudi Arabia despite coming up short and failing to become the champion. She feels good afterward. She feels like she and Bayley performed great. Wasn't a big fan of the match myself, but the performance, or rather the effort, was there, so I can't discredit them for that. And she says that they won't nitpick and that they're just going to enjoy the moment of just being the first women to become, the first champions, be a part of the first women's championship match in Saudi Arabia. And they're just going to appreciate being able to make history. And her hands are still shaking from being in that moment, being in that adrenaline rush and competing in that championship match in Saudi Arabia. We hear from Goldberg, who talks about how he hasn't really thought about WrestleMania and whether this championship win will take him to that point, whether he wins or not, what his future holds beyond winning the Universal Championship. But he said that his mind is solely set on dominating, going in there, and his mind is only set on beating one person, that being the Fiend, Bray Wyatt, and that he's not an easy foe by any stretch. But to him, it's very important to go in there and win the championship or carry the championship. But all he wants to do is go in there and kind of redeem himself. That's kind of his goal here, was to redeem himself and put on a better performance than he did the last time he was there in June of 2019. So they recap the match between Goldberg and the Fiend Bray Wyatt for the Universal Championship, which saw Goldberg emerge victorious in a matter of minutes to become the new champion. Not exactly everyone's favorite decision, but we hear from an emotional Goldberg afterward, a very happy, elated Goldberg, who talks about to win that championship again, it's a dream come true. 3 years removed from the last time that he won it in 2017. And he talks about how that pinnacle, the pinnacle of your career, kind of gets further and further away the older that you get. Which makes this moment all that much cooler to finally become the Universal Champion again, go in there, have a better performance, I guess, than he did against The Undertaker the last time, which isn't really tough to beat, but this match wasn't much better. It was It was a complete dud of a match. It was exactly what it probably should have been, and being only 3 minutes long. But at the same time, though, it was like a glorified squash of The Fiend is what it was. But anyway, he said that he was in awe, and he's happy to be the new Universal Champion. And that's how we went off the air here for this episode of The Day Of, focusing on Super ShowDown 2020. I enjoyed the episode, the pay-per-view itself. I would not recommend anyone go back and watch, although I enjoyed it, watching it the first time, and I didn't really feel like I wasted my time. You will not be wasting your time if you watch this episode of Day Of. It's only about 21 minutes in length. The last one of the Rumble was also very good. Had some audio issues, which have since been rectified, for the record. So check this out right now on the WWE Network, WWE The Day Of, on Super ShowDown 2020. It's also worth mentioning as well that I think a lot of the new content, if not all the new content, goes up now at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on the WWE Network. They don't wait until after SmackDown or Raw, as they usually have in years past, months past, recent weeks, whatever. Up until recently, they were always airing stuff after a certain show, after a pay-per-view, after Raw, after SmackDown. I think the last Day Of actually went up after the Rumble. No, I'm sorry, the one on the Rumble went up after the SmackDown. It aired after SmackDown that week on Valentine's Day or whatever. But now they're starting to put the content up first thing that morning as opposed to waiting, which I think is cool because I think, Netflix does that and all these other companies do it. So I think it's smart that WWE follows suit. And it makes it easier for me so I don't have to wait to watch it until after a show or the next day. I can watch it that day. And that's what I did with Super ShowDown. So check it out right now on the WWE Network. Very enjoyable episode. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out this episode of WWE Network and Chill. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. Since I will not be going to California at this point, due to the whole coronavirus scare and whatnot, I will be home to watch SmackDown tonight, so my SmackDown review should be up tomorrow here on the channel at some point, a little later on in the afternoon, a little later on in the afternoon, I would have to imagine, so keep an eye out for that. I don't know, since this is going up today, I have no idea what I'll watch or review for Sunday. If anything, I'll probably put up some sort of miscellaneous video. But keep an eye out for that as well this coming weekend. So stay safe out there, guys, with the whole coronavirus bullshit going around. Take care, and just have a great rest of your weekend. So I'm Graham Jason Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.